Good evening, everyone. Thank you for hopping in and joining us today. As we begin, just want to let you know that we're waiting for everybody to come into this webinar space. And as we do that, if you could check out the next slide, you will see the QR code links to our website as well as to our social media. So if you have a little bit of time before our webinar begins, do check us out here so you can stay tuned to our updates. We will be with you shortly. Hello, everyone. Good evening and welcome to Are the Kids All Right? Mental health webinar. And welcome to this little webinar room that we have here tonight. Now, as we begin, if you'd still like to and still have time, you can check out these two links. And if not, we'll get to them in a little bit. Welcome to our webinar. It's our pleasure to have you for yet another one of our sessions. Tonight, the topic's focus is on children's mental health. Now, getting straight to the point in webinars like this, whenever we begin, usually it involves some form of welcoming to fully allow the audience to feel warm and to get the stage really set. And for that, before we go into things today, can we please invite our founder of the Reframe Project? She is someone who is studying her master's in clinical psychology. She's been running the Reframe Project for years and is extremely passionate about ensuring that the audience has something that they can work with when it comes to the mental health sphere. Shaswini, over to you.
Hi everyone, thank you Ethan. Good evening everyone. On behalf of the Reframe Project, I would like to extend my warm welcome to all attendees and panelists. Thank you for taking your time to join us this wonderful evening. We truly appreciate your presence. The Reframe Project, next Daryl. Next. Okay. The Reframe Project consists of a group of youths that are passionate about psychology and mental health. We also hope to increase the public's awareness of mental health by creating digestible and accurate educational content. We aim to reframe the perception of mental health. Next. Every 3 months, we conduct webinars to provide a safe space for the public to engage mental health experts. In order to achieve our vision, it is important to ensure mental health information is accessible. And as of 2020, we alternate between English and Bahasa Malaysia webinars to engage a larger Malaysian audience. And because of this, we have been able to reach out to population in every state of Malaysia, including Sabah and Sarawak. Next. Some of the past webinars that we have organized includes difference between counselors, clinical psychologists and psychiatrists, decriminalizing suicide, men's mental health, and bagaimana untuk mendorong orang tersayang bagi mendapatkan bantuan kesihatan mental. And fret not if you have missed all of it, as all the recordings are actually available on our Facebook page and YouTube. Next. Now here we are with our 8th webinar actually, and I would like to show my appreciation to my team who worked hard for this webinar. And despite having other commitments like masters, 𝐃𝐄𝐒𝐂𝐑𝐈𝐏𝐓𝐈𝐎𝐍 and Darrell who are the project leader for this webinar. 𝐃𝐄𝐒𝐒𝐑𝐈𝐏𝐓𝐈𝐎𝐍, who is our amazing moderator for today, has been really supportive. The content team, Anis, Nalisa, 𝗲𝐶𝐶, and Charlene, have also done a great job researching and writing the content, ensuring that the information can be bite-sized and easily understood. Lastly, our fantastic designer, Kyra, who has been designing all the promotional posters. My deepest gratitude to all of you. Next. I'd also like to thank MCCHR, also known as the Malaysian Centre for Constitutionalism and Human Rights, for constantly supporting our events. They are a non-profit organization established with the mission of providing an integrated approach towards the protection and promotion of human rights in Malaysia through education and strategic litigation. And they have been graciously providing us their Zoom account to host all our webinars as well as funding assistance. Thank you so much for your continuous support in helping us bring events like this to the public. Without all their contributions, we would not be able to have the webinar for today. Now, speaking about our webinar for today, I'd like to touch upon how this webinar came about. Through the discussions, our team noticed that there was not enough awareness surrounding mental health among children. We felt that we needed this webinar to happen to reframe these narratives and raise the needed awareness on this topic. So we, the Reframe Project once again, thank all of you for coming here. Let's reframe the perception of mental health together. Thank you, and back to you, Ethan.
Thank you, Jasmine, for sharing and for reminding us, at least as an introduction, why these topics are so important and why these discussions really help us make space to have better conversations. Now, as we begin, we understand that the best way to begin is to continue setting the stage. And with that, we thought we would start with a little poll to help all of us get aligned on our topic for today. So there's our Zoom master, someone called Darrell. So once in a while, if you hear me call out the name Darrell, and if there's a Darrell at home, it's not you, so don't worry. So our Zoom master, Darrell, could I get your help to pull up our first poll of tonight? So our first question for tonight is, children are too young to be depressed? Question mark. Do key in your answer. Do you think yes? Do you think no? Or are you currently unsure? Okay, the answers are coming in very quickly. All right, I love this speed. Okay, it seems like so far we have a 68% who say no, 26% who say yes, and 5% to 8% who are still not too sure. Okay, can we end the poll and show the results, Darren? Okay, and here are the results for the first poll. So let's find out what the next question is. Can we get the next question, please? Okay, the next question. Children will grow out of their mental health struggles as they age? Question mark. Yes, no, it depends. Wow, the answers are coming in really fast for some people. I wonder if you have your mouse hovering right above the answer. Okay. Okay, numbers keep coming in. Okay, fantastic. Let's give it a couple more seconds. Okay, 1, 2, and Darrell, can you please reveal the results of the poll? Okay, so our poll says that 27% believe yes, 14% believe no, and 59% believe it depends. And with many of these discussions, it depends is such a broad range. And I'm glad we'll be able to further that discussion shortly. And can we have the last poll? Do you think that children can benefit from therapy? Yes, no, not sure. I think this is the fastest set of answers by far. We've already reached 40 plus people in easily 2 seconds. Okay, let's give it a couple more seconds. 1 and 2. Okay, and can we see the results? Okay, and the results are 98% say yes and 2% say not sure. Nobody says no just yet. Okay, thanks, Daryl, for helping us pull up the polls. So tonight, whether your answers were yeses or nos or not sures, what we hope to do is really further the discussion. As Shazvini has shared, this topic is something that we don't spend maybe enough time on. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention has reported worldwide that 10% of children and adolescents are experiencing some form of mental health disorder, but the majority of them do not seek help or receive care. And now, raising a child is difficult, and there are so many different components in our lives that we have to pay attention to. And that makes it really difficult for us to figure out what we can do. But sometimes it helps for us to be aware of what are the little things that we can take note of, and what are the ways that we can better support them. And many mental health conditions begin in childhood, and without these mental health treatments, we might be limiting them from reaching their full potential. So welcome to our webinar, Are the Kids All Right? It's a simple but powerful statement asking, are our kids doing okay? And in this webinar, we hope to cover a few areas, such as what are some practical tips that everyone can take from this webinar, whether you are a sibling, a parent, a teacher, or a caretaker, what are things we can really do to help improve the lives of the younger ones around us? And for that, we have a couple of panelists that we are very honored to have join us today. And allow me to introduce them. Can we get the next slide, please? Okay, our first panelist is someone who is a professional coach. He spent a lot of time supporting people in various different industries and in various different countries, various different forms of support. And to tell us more about that variety, you can read this here, but what better than for us to hear directly from the speaker himself? Our speaker is Leon, who is a professional coach. Leon, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and how your relationship of what you do relates to our topic today?
Hi everyone, my name is Leon. I'm very, very grateful to be invited to tonight's session. And well, I've been a child and all of us have been children before. And in a way, we had our experiences growing up. Now, I'm sure we have a wide variety of range of our experiences as children. And it might have changed for the children nowadays as well. I've started my career working with children. I've never thought I would work with children, but somehow I got pulled into it. These days, I work more with adults. So in the corporate sphere, in terms of leadership, coaching, all of that, and in the public sphere, self-love, taking care of yourself, stopping things that harm you, setting proper boundaries, all of those important topics. And in many forms, or in many ways, these are topics that are valuable for children as well. If we learn them as children, then we grow up navigating the world with much more ease. But it's not really taught in schools. In schools, we're taught to get A+ and 100 marks and all of that. There are other valuable skills that I believe are important for kids as well. So that's a little bit about me and my relationship with our topic today.
Thanks, Leon, for sharing. And it's always a pleasure to have you with us, someone with your experience, especially. If I'm hearing right, you started with working with kids. Now you work mostly with an adult population, but you see a lot of threads that connect. Things that adults need really are things that would benefit children to know about or to work with or be aware of at a younger age. And thanks for joining us. If you'll allow me, it's time for me to introduce our next speaker of the night. So if we'll flip the slide, our next speaker for today is Evelyn. She's a clinical psychologist. She also has a variety of different experiences working in many settings, both rural and city. And she's an advocate for the mental health industry as well as a professional. Evelyn, could you please tell us what you do and how does it relate to the topic of today?
Hi everyone. So Evelyn, not Evelyn, and I work as a clinical psychologist, and sometimes it's a big word, but basically it means that specialize in the population of diagnosing and intervening, providing therapy for children, adolescents, and a lot of times it doesn't just mean that it's the kids, right? It also comes with the whole package, the families, parents, and loved ones. It could be any issue. Difficulties controlling their emotions, their
Mhm.
behaviors, or even neurodevelopmental issues such as autism, ADHD. So there's a whole range of difficulties that I see, but I actually want to come with a message of hope, which is that even though we
Mhm.
see a lot of things from the other end, problem based, but a lot of times it's using the strengths that these children have to overcome those specific difficulties. So yeah, I mean it sounds like they have a lot of problems, but yeah, we see that hope, and this is why we're in this profession. Yeah.
Thanks, Evelyn. Sorry, just laughing because I find it so wonderful whenever we have speakers start with hope. Usually, if you notice, most webinars we end with hope, but starting with hope is it's a very good
Yeah.
change of pace.
Flipping the tables.
Exactly, for the better. So it's wonderful to hear, Evelyn is someone who has experience, and as she shared in her background, she works with the whole system because working with children means working with many parties. Thanks, Evelyn, for having us and for being with us tonight. So if we can get the slides off, can we welcome both our speakers to the screen? All right, so now we have Leon and Evelyn here. Just a note to the audience, if you would like to ask questions, you can drop them in the Q&A. We also have this live streamed on Facebook. And for those of you on Facebook, your questions will be compiled, so not to worry about it. So if you have any speakers you'd like to address or whatnot, we'll take the Q&A session after the discussion. But please, if you already have questions, no harm done putting it straight in the Q&A section. Okay, so without further ado, let's begin. And let's begin with really getting a lay of the land. So if we could start very simply, Leon, Evelyn, how prominent are children mental health issues?
I'm happy to let Leon get us started.
Thank you for the stage. How prominent? I guess that depends on where we are. I mean, different geolocations, there are different rates and different issues that we're facing, especially since as we mentioned, it's a system. It's not the child on their own, but also everything that surrounds the child. Parents, teachers, school system, social economic status, everything that surrounds impacts the child. So I don't have a blanket number that I can give us today. But what I can say is through interacting with them, we find out.
I think that's a very profound answer. And I think numbers are really challenging to get sometimes, especially wherever we are. But it is good to have an eye on the ground because that tells us what the problem is. Yes, sorry, you unmuted, Evelyn.
I was just getting ready for the next question. But okay, yes. I'm just picking up from where Ethan left off. From the ground, yeah, right? From the ground, if you ask professionals, it's gonna feel like the prevalence, which means the numbers of kids that we see with issues are a lot, because that's basically all the kids that we see, right? The cases we see, they come in with a specific issue that we want to work on. So it may feel like it's a lot of problems that we're facing at the moment. However, just keeping an eye on the numbers. Just now it was mentioned about 10% of children actually face and when they say face issues, usually this means that they get to the stage where they are diagnosed. So to get to the stage of being diagnosed means that parents have actually taken action, and the children has actually been seeing a professional for actually a number of visits before a diagnosis came about. So just think about it. This is just the number 1 in 10 of children actually getting diagnosed. The undiagnosed cases, perhaps just anxiety on a mild level or depression that's not being shared with people, it could be much, much higher than that. So in Malaysia, unfortunately, we don't really have a lot of studies which look into the prevalence of depression and anxiety. There's more internationally that shows that the situation is getting worse, especially after the pandemic. So we I think the researchers in Malaysia, we're trying to make up for that. We're working on it. So yeah.
All right, we'll stay tuned for the growth in the industry. I know that many people are working on it. I think that's such a thing to point out, which is that 10% that we talked about from the CDC statistics is the 10% that has actually been recorded. And in many people are struggling with a range. And if you don't mind sharing, Evelyn, as well, like elaborating on that, how would you define children's mental health, that topic for us, so we can better understand that range?
Okay. All right. We might have to go back to the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is in the 5th edition that is revised at the moment. So a lot of words, a mouthful of words. For a professional such as like those in the mental health field, we will look to this as the Bible for us to diagnose any situation. So technically, any disorder that is mentioned in this book is considered a mental health problem. And this actually ranges from like IQ issues to developmental problems, autism, not strictly a mental health problem, but they are listed because we know that they come with a lot of baggage of other emotional issues or behavioral problems. So the basics, depression, anxiety, all this will be counted. There are some lesser known disorders such as communication disorders, stuttering, mutism, all this will be considered mental health issues. So if anybody is interested to just pop over to, you can Google and take a look at the long list of disorders that is under the DSM-5.
For anybody in the audience wondering, the DSM, as our speaker just mentioned, it's a very fancy word for a list of symptoms and traits and characteristics. But what it really tells us is there's a variety of issues that can be faced by children. And that's in the disorder range. You know, we haven't even started talking about what well-being would mean like to children. Leon, I'm wondering if you had anything to add in your experience when it comes to children. What would you say? What would you elaborate on the idea of children's mental health?
So you actually just added on to it. I don't come from a clinical lens, so I know of the DSM. I took my psychology degree, but I don't diagnose. That's not under my competencies. And I look more at the well-being side, like what you just mentioned. Are they thriving in school, in their relationships, at home, all of the areas that a child has, are they thriving in them? Are they supported? Are they nurtured? Are they cared for? Are they loved? All of those are important areas on top of, are the kids all right?
Can I just quickly jump in? Sorry.
Yeah, yes, please.
But Leon actually mentioned a very great point, because Leon, you're not too far off, because the baseline to sort of see whether this is considered a mental health problem or not is the functioning. So are they thriving? Can they go to school? Can they do what they're supposed to do? Can they communicate? Are they contributing back to society? Okay, in the longer term. Yeah, but we always look at functioning. So Leon actually mentioned a great point.
Okay,
please,
after
by the
you
way,
said that, I can imagine the 8-year-old say, I'm going to contribute to society, which they do. Some of them actually do take on eco projects. They are advocating for recycling. They're doing a lot of great stuff as well. It's pretty cool to see what the youths are doing these days.
Thanks both our speakers. Please do, by the way, if you see points and you want to jump in, I think more than welcome. There's always many ways to, yes, just mumble a bit louder and I'll take the message and go, okay, somebody's speaking. But yes, thank you for those points. Thinking about children's mental health from two perspectives, which is, of course, we have the area of mental health issues and, of course, well-being. How do kids do? Are they thriving? Are they receiving the support they need? And are they able to function in their areas of life? Now, I know earlier one of our speakers talked a little bit about the COVID-19 impact, and I know every webinar talks about the COVID-19 impact, but let's talk about how that has impacted children. How would you say the pandemic and the lockdowns have impacted children and their mental health?
Okay, I think Leon is looking at me like with a heavy, like very suggestive sort of look. I'll take this. The cases that I see currently, children, I would say none of them have escaped from being affected by the pandemic because as children, they are at various stages of growth in their lives, right? I see more of an impact maybe within the preschool age, which 2 years of their lives was spent indoors, 2 years that they were supposed to be out exploring, learning, growing, being exposed to a lot of things, talking to neighbors or other children for the first time, and all this was taken away. Um, just the statement itself, you can already know that their lives were changed. But this is not just a psychological or an emotional thing. This is part of their developmental growth. So a lot of cases that I'm seeing at the moment, you can see that they're not at the level where they're supposed to be compared to their peers. Some children are fortunate, maybe they are not affected that much. Maybe just slightly, but some children, they are majorly affected because when you rob them of that opportunity, they don't have other areas to or avenues or platforms where they can actually enhance those skills. And you can see if you plot it on the graph, they're not where they're supposed to be at developmentally. And we know that when you're not able to be at a level or develop or hit that milestone, it's bound to affect other areas of life. So biologically it's already affected, and that is going to hit on to psychologically. It's going to affect the self-esteem, the confidence. It's going to move on to socially. They might not be able to function well in school, in even within the family unit itself.
Mhm. Thank you for helping us draw all the info out. Could you help, before we move on to Leon or the next questions, could you help paint us a picture? So you mentioned earlier that a lot of preschool kids in particular that you notice have been impacted in terms of their development. Could you tell us what that looks like?
So that would look like in the form of when you do assessments with these children, you can see that they're not hitting the milestones at the supposed age. So maybe just taking the area of language, when you're at the age of about 3, maybe you're supposed to be able to use language in a certain way, being able to formulate that sentence, I want this. But at 3 years old, they come in and they're still not really using the language properly. They might use a lot of scripted language. Scripted language could mean like something you can hear off YouTube. Ice cream. This is blue. So they have been exposed to screen time instead of interaction with real people, and the speech has been affected because they repeat a lot of words, but they don't use it in a very functional sense. That's just one example.
Okay, I think that's an example that's quite, not say visible, but audible, but something that we can hear and sort of see happening. So you notice that because of the lack of social interaction, it seems that a lot of the language milestones kind of held back a little bit, for an example.
For an example, and that source or that factor is not just that lack of social interaction.
Would you like to add on?
Oh, it could be the lifestyle. It could be a lifestyle, like parents were busy, exposed to a lot of screen time, not being able to go out and explore, which will improve their gross motor skills perhaps. So a lot of like lines, there's no one direct cause and effect, but the whole environment is affected, and then a lot of lines intersect. That one area is like language is affected.
Yeah, many different causes, many different intersecting things, and we've seen a lot of contributing factors from forcing people to stay at home, and that loss has really caused an impact. Leon, I'm wondering on your side, if I could look at it from the perspective of someone who works with probably the parents as well, have you seen this in any way? How the parents interact with the children, and how does that relate to the mental health side of things?
Of course. One big part for parents is they're so stressed out. Everyone's life was impacted during COVID, interrupted. Our daily use our daily flow got interrupted, and what used to be no longer was, and now it's starting to come back, but in a way there's no such thing as reverting back to pre-COVID. It has impacted us. Now we have to evolve throughout it, the next part of it. And it's not easy being a parent, and nonetheless being a parent at home, working from home, taking care of the kids. And you've heard from Evelyn that the iPad has played a significant role for the kids because they're using it for online classes, they're using it for YouTube, all of those to keep them occupied as the parents are working. And of course, it impacts them because kids need to play. You need to touch the grass, the ground, and tumble over and roughhouse a little bit and socialize with other kids and socialize with other adults, to be cared for, to have attention put onto them and know that they are valued. And it's not easy for parents to provide all of that on top of their day-to-day. So they have a big burden on them. And some of them are, for the parents' mental health as well, they're pretty impacted. Some of them. Some are thriving, some are impacted severely. Some lost their job. How am I going to provide for my kids? And it's not been an easy time for many people.
Thanks, Leon, for sharing. I think that also comes back to the point that we talked about earlier. It's a system, and many people, many parties are involved in making this work. And you know, even as we return to normal or return to what looks more normal, we would still like to figure out, you know, where we are now. What are some major factors or causes of mental health issues in children? Would anyone like to kickstart that question? What are the major factors that lead to mental health issues? You know, whether it's at school, home, online. Tell us more.
I have from my own experience. I don't know from a clinical perspective. For what I understand from working with kids, and when I was younger, it's very simple. Not easy, but simple. It's love. Am I actually cared for? Am I safe in my home? Am I safe with my parents? Do they love me? Do they care for me? And feeling and actually experiencing that is very different from, oh, I think I give my kids enough attention. I think they feel love. I show my love through giving this, through that. But if the child does not feel love because the love language is not a match, it is still an impact for the kid. So to get to know the kids, who they are, what they want, what they love, what they enjoy, what they don't enjoy, that's a significant part in the right direction.
Right. Okay. What I'm hearing is like one of the factors that could help children or help parents figure out where can we start in terms of giving them, you know, a leg up, is to take the time to show affection or to help a child understand that they are cared for. And it's not just attention, but it's also taking the time to know the child.
Right.
Okay.
I'm seen.
To
I am
help
not
the child feel
seen.
seen.
I'm not perceived. I'm not. Who am I? What am I?
Sorry, I'm smiling because these are very philosophical questions that we normally ask. Who am I? What am I? But as a child, these are very real questions and a very real sense of wanting to be seen and wanting to be acknowledged.
And children form simple identities because they haven't developed their frontal lobe yet for abstract thinking that much. So they take things at more surface level. And as they grow into their teenage years, they form more complex identities, and that presents a whole nother topic or conversation.
That's a very beautiful sentiment, a very beautiful point as well about the fact that at that age, some things can be simple questions, but it's really the start of developing a sense of who am I? And it can be very helpful to have parents take the time to discover that with their children. Evelyn, is there anything you want to add on as well about, you know, major factors, mental health issues in children?
You know, Ethan, you ask very like seemingly simple questions, but actually it's like whoosh, a lot of information. I think Leon actually covered the. If I take this question in terms of like, you know how we draw like those circles, like it
Mhm.
expands, right? So I think Leon actually covered the center, which is like the individual himself as a kid. What are some of things that you actually face, how you actually think, why the family, which is like the interaction between the parent and the child. So how does the family dynamics work? Um, I'm just gonna add on a little bit to the biological aspect, and then maybe the community or the systemic sort of aspect, which is that biologically, genes have like they are not the main cause of any problems, but genes and the environment are actually some of the factors that can lead to mental health problems. So added together, it doesn't mean that if your kid, so yes, parents, it doesn't mean that if your kids have problems, it's because of your genes. So even if research is showing it right now very clearly, even if your kids, your family line has that gene, but if the environment does not happen in that sense, that gene will not be activated, meaning like mental health genes will not be activated, even if there's nothing much that happened. And we know that the COVID pandemic is a very major issue. So preempt aside, biologically, genes, environment, moving out to the family, parenting style, moving out to the area, how long does it take to see to get or to see a mental health professional? Is it even accepted? Does the culture within that area sort of like accepts the idea of seeing a mental health professional? If you go to the system, are the services even available where you stay? So there are so many intersecting factors. There are people who want to see mental health professionals. They know that there's something wrong and they want to get help, but the waiting list is too long. So
Mhm.
so many different factors that actually play into this.
Mhm. It's always a very long ingredient list. I'm wondering if you could share from your experience, what are some of the more common causes or more apparent causes that maybe people don't realize can impact someone's mental health, especially children?
I would say currently at our stage, the more common causes, I would rather actually say that we might not be at that stage yet, because sometimes it's even hard for parents to even pick up on the signs itself,
Mhm.
that or maybe certain symptoms that your kids are actually showing, uh, that says that, oh, this interaction might be harmful, or there might be something else that's ongoing. Not that it's the parents' fault, but because we have not been educated in a way that tells us, okay, the moment you see things like this happen, this is the way that you should be dealing with it. So I can't quite go to the common causes that people don't pick up on without actually going further in. We're not educated enough as parents,
Mhm.
like to say that, okay, I know what to do. This is the general SOP that I do when I know that my kid is facing something, something is going on.
Mhm. I think that highlights the essence of things, which is um, the big question is, how do we know something's going on?
Mhm.
How would you, if we were a parent, how would you start that conversation? I know I am really deepening the hole we're going down, but yes.
Um, Back to the original question that we were discussing at first. How's
Mhm.
your kid functioning? Leon uses the word thriving. Is your kid thriving? If your kid
Mhm.
was thriving and now he's not, or she is not, is there a reason why? So if the reason, and you're trying to think about it and you cannot really pinpoint why, how, I think it's about time that you speak to a professional.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a very good one-liner of things for us to think about. If there's a sudden change in how a child is behaving or the way that they are thriving, and we can't figure out the reason, then it's time to seek further assistance. Well, that's a very good thing to look out for. Um, okay, before we go in further into that, Leon, anything would you would like to chip in?
Yes, I would like to add on to that as well. It's a beautiful point. And to have that sensitivity to notice the difference, the shift, is important. And for that sensitivity to, or that capacity to have the sensitivity, for parents, it's also to take care of themselves. Sometimes you've seen the Asian context, many parents live on the narrative that I have to sacrifice for my children. And they take terrible care of themselves, neglect even, and to the point that in some ways neglect is also abusive. So that treatment towards ourselves doesn't give us the capacity to be present with our kids, to be present with our lives. And if I'm disconnected from my life, I'm disconnected from my heart, I'm disconnected from the present moment, then I don't have the capacity to notice the difference in my children.
Leon, correct me if I'm wrong. So what I'm hearing is one way or one thing that can impact children's mental health is also, it's a nearby factor. It's the fact that sometimes parents, with a very busy workload and whatnot, don't get the chance to be aware of their own health or their own self-care, and that makes it even harder to be attentive. Am I hearing you right?
That's part of it, yes. But the bigger, broader view is on capacity to be in the moment. Disconnection from the moment, I cannot notice what's happening. If I'm in my head, in my own world, I'm thinking about other things, I'm not here. How am I to notice what's changing for my kids? I might not even notice them. Like, oh yeah, I have a kid. I forgot. And that for the kid as well, presence is also important. Just now being seen. It's like, I am here with you. And that creates safety. Because one big challenge for what I see in many Asian parents is emotions. When children are experiencing emotions, or quote unquote big emotions, that's not really such thing as big or small emotions. They are emotions. And many sense for parents who don't have the capacity to be with their own emotions, they don't have the capacity to be there for their children's emotions.
What does it mean? Okay. What do you mean when you say being there with our emotions?
Not suppressing our emotions, not denying them, not judging them. Being aware and being with our emotions is the capacity to sit with that emotion and be curious what's going on. Because emotions are not good, they are not bad, they are messengers. All emotions have a message for us. And if we don't care enough to pay attention to the emotion, then we try to suppress it and then it builds up and then it explodes. Doesn't work. But if we can be with them, be with the emotion, it changes as it tells us what's really important. For example, anger can be because a boundary has been crossed or an injustice has happened, and that's not okay. And it gives us that energy to take action. It's important. If we deny that part and then we see something that's not right, we get abused, all of that, we go, oh, that's okay, that's life. That's not very, can I use the word healthy? That doesn't feel right. That's not very valuable to human thriving, for the parents thriving. And if I don't allow myself to be with my own emotions, anger, sadness, whatever emotion pops out, of course, I cannot be with my children's emotions. Hey, shut up. You don't cry. Stop crying. How come you're crying? I don't get it. Instead of holding that safe space for the kid to experience that emotion and to be curious with the kid, hey, what's going on? And children don't have the ability to really articulate. Like the prefrontal cortex hasn't developed, but we can use simple words to get to know what's going on in their world. I say, I don't know. Can you can you describe it? Can you draw it? Can you express it in any way? Yeah, when this happens, I feel bad. Okay. and you meet them where they are, and you start to understand them. And that creates for the children the ability to be with their own emotion. The parent models it for them because they have a direct experience of, oh, this is what it's like to be okay with my emotions, to understand them. And not many people have that. Many people had to go through that in adolescence or in adulthood. I've met people who are 50, 60 and they're experiencing the same things. And to learn to really be with ourselves, to hold that safe space for ourselves. Because it's sad to say that it's pretty rare. So there's a shift happening for us now. And I would say COVID is a big catalyst for that, hey, we're actually looking into these topics. And we're discovering, oh, what does it mean to hold a safe space for myself? What does it mean to be okay with my emotions? What does it mean to be gentle with myself? What does it mean to be present, to be alive, to thrive? Those are important questions.
Thanks, Leon, for sharing that. Evelyn, any thoughts you want to add on to?
What Leon mentioned earlier was, I think, carried a lot of compassion and empathy for a lot of issues that are faced, as I wouldn't say we sort of like are it, but for a lot of Asian families. So when Leon was sharing, I think the image that came to mind was like that parent who was there. You looked after your child. You make sure that your child is fed, is clothed, goes to school, gets pocket money, nothing bad happens to your child. But not being there means that you're physically there, but when something bad happens and emotions come out, you may not respect that emotions, or you just sometimes you don't know how to deal with it because as parents, sometimes parents ourselves, we may not have learned how to do it from our parents. So intergenerational, we don't learn how to change that way of interacting with our children. So it's becoming more prevalent right now. It doesn't mean that previously the parenting methods are all wrong. It just means that there's more information right now. There's more opportunities to learn, so that in Leon's word, we can be more present for our children.
Thanks for a wonderful sum up. Essentially, what I'm hearing is from your side is the understanding that as we grow as a society, we learn that there are more things that we can do for children to give them a better fighting chance. And elaborating on the fact that one of the points that Leon brought up, which is that as adults, one thing that we can do is show that we are okay with our own emotions. We can accept them and we are willing to explore them. And as children maybe don't yet have the vocabulary to explain their emotions, we can help them explore it so they can make sense of what's going on inside.
I would like to change the word better fighting chance to better thriving chance.
Oh, I love it. That's going to be our word for tonight, thriving. It seems to be the road we're going down. All right, a better thriving chance. Not everything has to be a fight. I love that.
It doesn't have to be.
Speaking of that, if we can touch on that. So, I think that sounds very much like having that adult with you, having that practice being okay with your emotions and learning to thrive in that space is one of the protective factors, things that help give children a thriving chance. Yes, we're doing it. What are the other protective factors or things that give this support for children?
That's a good question. There's so many touch points for children. One could be schools, teachers and friendships, and all of that are important. We're social beings. If you only interact with our family, then that's like 4 people, 2 people. There's an entire world out there. So for children to be exposed to the world is important. And there's also that new sense where now parents are, then they are aware of taking care of their kids, and sometimes they go from 0 to 100 or more than 100, and it becomes overprotective, and that is also not very valuable for the children's development. So to let them make their mistakes, to let them explore the world, to let them fall if they need to fall a little bit, bruise a little bit on their arm, and that's okay.
I really like that point, which is one side is going not aware at all, and one side is going everything's a problem. So I'm wondering, in both of your experiences, what separates that line from being a conscious parent to going, oh my goodness, we must stop everything from getting in the way?
You use the word. In a way, you're answering all your questions.
Am I? That's fantastic. But tell me how.
You use the word conscious.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm unconscious, then I don't know that I don't know. I don't even see it as a problem. And it's just like what Evelyn said, intergenerational patterns that are living me. Because if we're not conscious, then the patterns that have shaped our lives so far, they run our lives.
Mm-hmm.
The stories live us rather than we choose the stories. And sometimes those stories are outdated.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not conscious, then we don't know, and we continue them, and they might cause more harm than good. So to be conscious, not just parents, but conscious human beings, that's very important. Because I used to run a self-love community, and there's the 3 pillars of self-love, or the 3 pillars of transformation. And in order for that sweet spot of self-love or that transformation to bloom, truth is very important. The truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. And that means to let go of our fantasies, our illusions, our delusions, and the lenses that we put on that we believe the world is. If I have blue lenses, the world is blue. If I have pink lenses, the world is pink. And to remove those glasses or those filters and see the world as it actually is. What's the truth right now? And to develop the presence and the sensitivity to notice that distinction and that truth is very important. But at the same time, that can be scary. It can be painful if I see the truth that I don't want to see. Which is why the second pillar is also important. It's love. And I used to get so angry at the topic of love. Like, what the hell is it? How do you do love? I was cursing at my ex-boss, and I was asking him the topic. And he's the most compassionate man I know. And he just looked back at me with loving eyes, and he just said, it's not a doing. You don't do love. You are loving. So in a sense, it's you being loving, being compassionate, being gentle. And in the self-love community context, it's towards yourself and also towards others. In this context, it's towards yourself as a parent, and also towards your children, towards your spouse, towards the entire system. And to really see what's working, what's not working, choose to keep what's working, let go of what no longer works. And then what naturally occurs is thriving. And the third pillar, of course, it's devotion. You take action, you choose. Because one thing is to notice, wow, I've never seen that before, and do nothing with it, and nothing changes. But if I notice it, I make a difference, I adjust something in my life, chances are that might create a better result.
Okay, so far I'm hearing 3 pillars. Help me check if I'm getting them right. The first one is to be conscious. Let's say if we're talking about, that fine line between being overprotective and not, what are the lenses that we're using? Are we seeing the world through real issues, or is it issues that we have taken from our past experiences? The second one is to be more compassionate with ourselves and with those around us, to make room to be more loving and more caring. And the third one is to take action where you can and actually do things that take you closer to what is needed or where you want to be. Am I getting the essence of those 3 things?
Roughly, yes.
Okay,
The
as
truth,
good as we
love,
can do
and
without a separate webinar.
and devotion is not just about action, it's about choosing.
Mhm.
Because in
Making
that sense, you are
choices.
conscious. If you are unconscious, you cannot choose. This is the only way life is. And there is nothing I can do about it. And this is how I live, and this is my life, and it is what is. But if I am beginning to take on my journey of awareness, I start to see different things, different perspectives. This is not the only way life can be. There's also this way, there's also this way, there's also this way. What do I choose? What's true for me in the moment?
Thanks, Leon. Evelyn, what about yourself?
I'm still reeling from that three pillars, and it's like so beautiful when Leon talks about it. I am a person who likes plans, so I believe there are parents out there who are also like, tell me what to do now, and I think the easiest way is like go with a plan A, B, C. I do this with my clients. I do this with my parents sometimes. If you're unsure, like I'm too much or I don't care enough, right? That's the question. Plan A, talk to your other half. I think your other half, the other parent, is always the best person to measure, like, am I going crazy here, or like I'm not caring enough. Like your other half is always the perfect person to talk about your child with, throw bounce of ideas, brainstorm. That's always the plan A, right? Plan A, then both of you felt like it's weird, or maybe you still have questions after plan A. Go to plan B. Plan B could be other people who know your children within the society. It could be if it's within a religious association, maybe speaking to your child goes to religious classes. You could ask the religious teachers. You could go to church and ask. You could talk to the school teachers. If they share the same concerns, then it's time to go to plan C, which is I'm thinking that it's easier to think as the last resort, but actually it's a doorway to a whole new world. But the last resort would be go to a professional, get an appointment with the nearest mental health professional. So it's very simple. Step 1, step 2, step 3. If it stops at step 1, perfect. Step 2, perfect. Step 3 doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It just means that there are other things that you have to consider.
Right. I think that's really amusing because when you said it, I realized, it's C, but we have so many more alphabets. So, right. Yeah. So it's very funny because usually when we talk about seeking professional help, it sounds like the last thing. But if you look at the layers, it's just 3. So it's not that far down. You don't have to wait for Z before you
Actually, you
go.
don't even have to wait for possible signs of mental health to bring them to a mental health professional. If you're looking at the context of thriving and well-being, you don't need a problem to see a professional.
That's an interesting area because it opens up a lot of exploration. What's on your mind, Leah?
More of nurturing and enhancing rather than problem solving, because children are not problems to be solved.
I think that's a really good area of exploration. I'm wondering if we could check with what's going on the ground. Evelyn, do you have many parents coming to you for the well-being side of things?
In Malaysia, unfortunately, at this stage, lesser of that. If you want to say that they're coming in for the well-being and the thriving side of things, it could be that they already have a diagnosis and they are looking at how to improve the overall environment and well-being, or how they go through life, basically. So in a way, it's sort of like what Leon is talking about, although I know he's referring to something else. However, I think at this stage in Malaysia, this is something that parents are open to do. Like, okay, we already know what the issue is. Now it may not be problem solving, but it could be like, oh, because we cannot solve the problem, right? This is not a disorder that once I take medication it goes away. It could be a lifelong thing. So improving or learning coping methods, how to transit the best way from stage A to stage B. So I think a good point to take away at this stage is that even when you see a mental health professional or even any medical professional, it doesn't mean that for life you have to see this professional. It could be that, okay, we've already done our best. We are maximizing the capacity for my child to live in this way. And then yeah, you could just taper off services. And then when it comes that your child is having a major transition period, let's say primary school to middle school or to secondary school, and then that's when you get the professionals in again. Okay, is there anything that we can do on the preventive nature, which is thriving in a sense, not waiting for the problem to appear, but to maximize your child's potential at that point. Maybe when you see that the puberty stage like hits, and then am I the best person to do the sex talk with them? Okay, go to your neighborhood psychologist or counselor. So they can do that. They can do that. It doesn't mean that once you see them, right, they're gonna hang on to you and your family and you will never be able to run. They are also the best person to tell you that, yeah, you're doing great at this point. This is what we can do. Maybe we will see your family again at the next stage, and they will tell you what to look out for. So C to Z is not all the time. Okay, maybe between C and D is 3 years. It doesn't mean that it's forever. Okay.
Thanks for scoping that for us. So there are many different circumstances one will come in, as Leon mentioned as well, for thriving in Malaysia. Typically what that looks like is looking at areas, how can we help our child or the family cope with what's going on? How can we better prepare from moving to one point to another, even growing up, various stages of life. And it doesn't have to be every week for eternity. It can be based on the seasons, based on the need. Am I getting you right?
Perfect. You do it so well, Ethan.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think actually this segues to another question, which I think is quite common on a lot of parents' minds, or at least what we hear is quite common, is where do we differentiate between when to take a child to a pediatrician, a psychiatrist, or a clinical psychologist? I know this is more mental health field related, but I think it's a common question of, okay, something's not right. Where first? What do we do?
This I leave to Evelyn because I am not fully qualified to answer.
All right, I'll just jump in. First of all, congratulations, because you've come to the stage that you've acknowledged that there is something going on. That means you already passed the stage where Leon mentioned self-awareness. You're at the stage that, okay, I know I've passed plan A, plan B is now for plan C. So usually parents will go to the pediatrician. If you have a local GP or you already have someone that you've been seeing that has been observing your child throughout various milestones, that will be the best person to talk to first. And generally, the pediatrician will be able to recommend best. Let's say it's time to go to the psychiatrist or go to the clinical psychologist, or maybe just need to speak to a counselor, or maybe even your GP or the pediatrician can solve matters at that stage itself. So never underestimate how even physical health issues could present as if it's a psychological or a mental health issue. So get your test done first at the GP level, at the pediatrician level. And then after that, when you've been cleared of all tests, and then you figure out that, okay, there's a deeper underlying problem that we want to address. And your pediatrician can say, okay, the main point here is we want to come to a diagnosis. For diagnosis, they usually refer it to a clinical psychologist. We take them in, we run a lot of tests, and then we can usually come to a conclusion. Even if there's no conclusion, most of the time, the psychologist would be able to tell you what has been ruled out. So this is not autism, this is not ADHD. It could be looking at your lifestyle currently and the environment, a different combination of factors. Pay attention to this. We might keep an eye out. We'll work at this level, and then after that, come back in 3 months. When the case is very obviously mental health related, meaning that you need medication, this is when the psychiatrist would be the best person to come in. Currently, in most parts of the world, only psychiatrists can dispense medication. So this is very true for Malaysia. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor who's been trained to diagnose and also give prescriptions for adults and children with mental health problems. So if a psychologist that you're seeing tells you that they can dispense medication, or counselor run. when they turn around to like take a drink of water, run, take your child and run. Okay, only take medication from your psychiatrist. So again, we sort of see it at different levels. So it feels like it's just the entrance level. Maybe you go to your GP, the pediatrician. If it's necessary for concern, it will be brought up to the level of a psychologist, a clinical psychologist. And then after that, if medication is required, a psychiatrist will come in. Most of the time, therapy, in terms of the talk therapy, most of the time is delivered by the psychologist or a mental health counselor. The psychiatrist will come in to check the dosage of the medication, make sure that everything is running smoothly so that they can benefit from that talk therapy or any other form of therapy that's recommended.
Okay, thanks, Evelyn. So what I'm hearing is a pediatrician is a safe go-to or a GP to understand if the problem is a surface medical issue or if there's any suspicion that there could be a mental health component. And if there is, they might refer depending on what the patient, the child would need. Now, I'm curious, together with that, how would a parent even know when it is time? I know we talked a little bit about this earlier. So you mentioned functioning, right? I think even Leon, you talked about that briefly, the idea of can a child thrive? What is a good way to know when something is off in terms of function? Because it sounds like a very technical word. What do we mean when we say function?
I can give my perspective, then we go to the professional perspective.
Sure.
For me, it's noticing, like I mentioned, the different areas. So I look at body, emotion, head or thinking. And we can also look at how they're performing at school. We can look at their relationships. These are the 5 that I'm seeing so far. How are they in each area? If
Can you
there's
repeat those 5 first? Yeah.
Yes, head, heart, thinking, feeling, body, sensing, relationship, and functioning at school. That's what I see.
I counted 8.
Oh, that's 8.
I think you meant like heart, and then
Yeah.
you changed that to feeling, right?
So I think it could be head, heart, and body is 1.
Biological, is it? No, but that's cognitive also, right?
Or head is thinking, heart is feeling. That's my phrasing of it.
Okay, got it.
All right.
What about your perspective, Evelyn?
The question was, when do we get help?
And specifically, because I think a lot of parents and children might come across that word functioning. What is that really about?
Well, in a technical, I have to go technical for this. Technical sense of the word functioning, we'll be looking at what is a kid supposed to do: play, go to school, do stuff in the family. So as long as this 3 is fulfilled, then in a sense that they're okay, or they might have struggles. Okay, so if they're not able to do any one of these 3 areas, then that's the point where you need to actually get help. I think what I'm describing here in terms of functioning is when a child is ready to be diagnosed. So that could be, if we're using the alphabets again, that could be G, or sometimes it could be R for different children. So when you get to the point where it's just a niggling feeling at the back of your mind that something is off, you cannot really put your finger on it, and it's been bothering you for 3 days straight, I think that's already a signal that you need to talk to somebody. Don't wait until their functioning are affected, then only you say, oh, okay, then this is the time that I talk to someone. If it's bothering you and and this sounds like a parent who treasures knowledge, right? You want to know more, you like to gather information, and where best to get information than from professionals themselves. So you might not feel that it's a problem that can be diagnosed, but you can leave that session benefiting from that trove of knowledge that these professionals have for you. So that means at least from that, you know that, oh, this is something that I should keep an eye on, or this is something that, yeah, it was just me worrying. Or maybe that professional can even point out something that you didn't notice. So you come out enlightened, and your path to self-awareness, like what Leon said, has already skipped a few steps. So you can take it as that.
Right. So basically, one of the instinctive, or rather more intuitive ways, is to take note if something feels off, and not to wait until we get to that point of functioning. Because the point of not functioning, something's already going wrong. And if we can, instead of waiting for the alphabets to go all the way down of so many different calls of action or things getting really severe, even at that stage of something might be off, visiting a mental health professional will help you figure out where to go next, or possibly even save some progress before we get to later stages. And I know that, of course, many parents or many people with children in their lives may get that sense of, something is not quite right. I'm wondering if, for those who maybe feel like they can't trust their judgment, what are some symptoms or common signs that parents can look out for actively that say that, okay, my child maybe has mental health issues?
Okay, I'll just jump in. The first thing you can look at is their sleep patterns. Usually for most of the major health issues, if sleep is affected, that's the first sign that other things will be affected. Even if mental health is not affected, physical health will be affected. So sleep, very important. Diet, very important. I wouldn't say school functioning or how they're doing in school, but that one is very subjective because like parents have different expectations. So sleep, diet, these two basic things, you can already sort of like keep an eye on it. Yeah.
Could you give us an example of that on the diet side? What did you mean by that?
A diet mean suddenly eating more than usual or less than usual. So anything that's off the norm, it could be affected to the point where weight is sort of like +5 or -5. It's a good idea to keep an eye on that.
Right.
5 kg, by the way, not 5G.
Right. Thank you. For any of us who are feeling like maybe overworrying, it's 5 kg, right? So just the very more visible things, in case anybody's second guessing themselves, could be things like being aware of changes in sleep patterns that are either too much, too little, eating habits, and any visible weight gain of +5 kg, -5 kg. It says we should look into it or figure out more about what's going on here. Leon, anything you'd like to add to that?
Just a little bit, because it builds on behavior, noticing behavior. So sleep and diet, very important. But you can also notice personality changes. If your child is bubbly and they're the most loving in the world, and all of a sudden they come home and then they don't want to talk, they are sad, they've been like that for a few days or weeks, then something might be up. It could be bullying at school, it could be many other things. So when you notice changes, it could be useful to have a conversation with them. And really, it's the title of the talk. Hey, are you all right? How are you? How is school?
Right. I think that adds on to that being conscious, right? As we talked about, taking the time to be aware of what are the changes. And thanks for giving us an example, which is that personality, that change in the usual personality. If someone is always very jovial, very friendly, very happy to see you, converses very warm at home, suddenly switches off or becomes a different person, or their personality seems not quite the normal as per their usual for a few days or a week or so, you notice it's a pattern, that could be another sign as well, to ask and to get to see if anything's up. Okay, does anyone have anything they'd like to add on for that point?
I'm good. I think we're dispensing information out by the buckets, and I'm concerned like how much is being digested.
Right, right. So for a quick recap, the things that we have talked about so far involve how can we take a look at and see when kids and children might need some support. We talked about noticing some things, changes in biology, things like eating, sleeping patterns. We talked about noticing changing personality. That's the latest update. And we got to see Leon and Evelyn's thinking basis for a little bit. All right. Now, just a quick question as well. So let's say we've noticed it, and this perhaps is a question more for Evelyn. There's something going on, and the child is now going to see a clinical psychologist or a counselor. What can a parent expect from a session with a counselor or clinical psychologist?
The nature of the job of a counselor and a clinical psychologist is similar but different. The psychologist will focus more on certain assessment tools, will focus more on diagnosis, will focus more on these two things at the initial stage. Not that the counselor doesn't do that, but because the way that a clinical psychologist is trained, they will be specifically looking at certain diagnosis. So when you go in, usually the first session will definitely be for an assessment. This will take place for at least 2 hours. And in the process of an assessment, because it involves a child, so both parents and the child will be involved. There will be a time where the parents will be interviewed because to get the medical background, family background, how the child usually interacts, whether the milestones were hit appropriately. There will be a session for observation, meaning we see how the child interacts with the parents, with strangers, by himself, when the parents are not in the room. There will be a section where there could be one-to-one interaction with your child, looking at different areas. And there would be a time where the parents will be actually filling up certain forms or some questionnaires, and those questionnaires that you fill up are actually tests that are designed to specifically know if what your child is facing is considered a diagnosable disorder or not. So at the end of this stage, the psychologist will usually be able to give you some preliminary conclusions. I think you need to give the professionals some time also to tabulate the results from some of the things that were observed. So that's why I said preliminary conclusions. If you want the full analysis, give them some time when the report comes out, and any psychologist that's worth their weight will be able to give you a report that is detailed in the sense that why is this a problem, why is this a concern, why is this not, these are the strengths of your child, this is the plan that is suggested. So from that 2-hour session, you will be able to have some conclusions and come up with at least a plan of action of a sorts after that. Yes. Any part that I'm missing though, you think?
Okay, let me recap that. So if let's say, if a parent were to come in and they're going to see a clinical psychologist, they can expect that the first session or so will be really about gathering information and getting to know the child and the parent's experience living with the child. What are and they may need to fill out some questionnaires, may need to observe how the child behaves to get an idea of what is the situation. Is there a mental illness that needs to be diagnosed? And where can we go from there? Would you be able to say what happens if a parent sees a counselor on the other hand?
If the parent sees a counselor, usually it will be for an emotional or a behavioral need. So the counselor would also do certain assessments or tests, but these tests will not be for the purpose of diagnosing the child. The test will be for the purpose of establishing a baseline to know that, oh, we need to focus on these areas, and this is something that is a strength, and this is something that we could work on, and then to come up with a plan of action. So the counselor's approach would probably also be more I would say relatable, not to put in any stereotypes at the moment, but from my experience, clinical psychologists, although they also have empathy and all that, but because when they do the assessment, they are putting on their scientist cap. So they are very analytical, like, oh, what is going on? Oh, this is the thing, this is this. But if you prefer more of the human touch, the counselors will be perfect. Like they know how to sort of have that empathy while balancing. Maybe there are certain needs that it has to be addressed within that first session themselves. I think counselors do a great job at this.
Mhm. Okay, what I'm hearing, the main pillars of difference, one would be to find out a diagnosis, to get an assessment. A clinical psychologist comes in there to get the facts, the figures, to have that assessment, getting the information from the parents in that sense, to see if there's a mental illness, specifically for that purpose. But can also provide therapy along the way. What is an action plan that a parent can take with their child? If we have a counselor, it's towards some basic figuring out of what's going on, but more so to providing emotional support, helping the child and parent figure out what are some goals they can work on. And it's more towards the emotional and behavioral support side. Okay,
Wonderful.
so these are the couple of things that we can expect. So there's psychologist, there's counselor, and then as you mentioned earlier, there's the medical side of things, where psychiatrists, if needed or recommended by any professional, to get medicine to help with the mental health issue. Okay, a quick one before we move on. What steps, and I know this is a big question, what steps can we take to increase the awareness on children's mental health? Because this is something that is usually quieter. Usually we like to talk about the adults. But what can we do to raise awareness on children's mental health?
You're right in that sense. You usually focus on adults because by that time it's very visible. It has
right. Adults are noisy. We can be quite noisy. Yes. Continue.
Sometimes it's undiagnosable.
Right. Sorry, Leon, you were saying, I couldn't help it.
All good.
Be noisy, yes. Continue.
So to realize that a lot of it comes from childhood is important. If not, then they live their 50+ years of their lives, and then they carry all that throughout the 50+ years. It's a very painful existence.
Mm-hmm.
And no parent would want that for their children. So to recognize this is going on in adults, and it starts from childhood, many of it, not all of it, many of it. And to begin that work of consciousness, like you say, being a conscious parent. And that's a big commitment. To live a conscious life, that means I cannot live the way I used to live. My old patterns that I'm so comfortable with that no longer serve me, to notice them and not change them will be painful. It is a commitment to live a conscious life, not just a conscious parent.
Mm-hmm. So to live a conscious life, but also, as you mentioned earlier, it's helping people to see that when we look at adults and we look at the struggles that we have, there is some root in childhood. And if we can champion helping children deal with their mental health, mental well-being, their thriving, we help them grow better as adults. Evelyn, yourself?
I was just thinking that the best way is what we're doing right now. Talk about it. Talk about it over dinner. Okay, so we're talking about politics a lot recently, right? Just right after that, just slip it in. Oh, mental health. Nice way to introduce another heavy topic. But yes, talk about it. The best way to increase awareness, to make it okay to talk about kids' mental health, is always to talk about it. I don't mean that you talk about it in a way that, oh yeah, my kid diagnosed with depression yesterday. Not in that manner, but yes, in a more sensitive manner, highlighting certain information that you read. Did you know that 1 in 10 kids nowadays actually face mental health issues? And let me share with you a quick fact that I learned from a talk that I attended yesterday. Apparently, right, even when your kid's sleep is affected, right, you need to pay attention to whether it's a psychological problem or not. If you want to avoid the word mental health issue, maybe you can say that, or maybe you want to check if there's any problem psychologically. Yeah, maybe it might be easier to say it that way. So just share facts, bring it up, say like, oh, the other day in school they actually had a mental health talk, and then I went, and then after that, just an easy way to bring it into conversations. Someone has to do it. If you are the brave, beautiful soul, you can do it, and make it easier. You never know that if another parent is also struggling about this issue with their child, but has not the courage or the resources or the information to talk about it. And when you talk about it, if they don't say anything about it, at least they go home and then they will search it, or like they will follow the Reframe project, and then after that after that they will sort of know what are the next steps, or they can then pay attention to if there are any webinars that would be helpful.
So I'm hearing slip in the topic and start having conversations. It could be as simple as over dinner. I know in Malaysian context, it's easier to keep it light. I think your suggestion of how do we weave it in can be as simple as you read something in the news. I read something in the news about this topic. If you're a child, oh, there was this webinar or this conference in school, or my teacher was talking about this topic. Find light ways to introduce it, because you never know what other discussions people will have as a result of that, or what they might Google that would help them feel better or figure things out. Okay, I would love to move into the Q&A now. We have questions coming up. Are both of you ready? I know there's not much option, but if you'd like to sip on some water before we begin, I think now is a good time.
Where's my mug?
All right. Okay, so let's get started. So there is one question. So your questions are being compiled. So if you have questions, please, you can drop them in the Q&A. Try not to put them in the chat, as they get lost in the chat. Put them in the Q&A. Questions from Facebook are also coming in, so we will compile them and ask them accordingly. So the first question to both Leon and Evelyn, do you think that nurture plays a great deal on the mental health of a child, in the sense that early experiences of a child affects mental health as well as the future? Yes, okay, so basically the question asks, what does a role of nurture in a childhood do? How does it play out to affect a child growing up?
In a way, Evelyn has already answered that. There is the
It's a very
the
big
nature,
question.
and there is the upbringing, the nurture, and certain matches of situation and the genetics unlock certain things. And we don't have a direct map of what causes what, and we don't really have a map of, okay, this is what we avoid, this is what we do. But again, brings back to, it's a oversimplification, but at the same time, it's at the essence of it is consciousness.
So I think we're drawing back to some points that we talked about earlier. Thanks, Leon, for mentioning that. Things like being, noting, children feeling safe to feel their emotions, having a role model watching their parents process their emotions, having that healthy social interaction, support system, and so on. Evelyn, I'm wondering, since this question is also specific to nurture, is there anything you'd like to add on before we go to the next question, in terms of nurturing a child?
Okay, I would say yes, for sure. Nurture has a part to play. It can't run away from that. However, you can never put too much blame to nurture, because situations happen sometimes, and we are not known to do well whenever unexpected things happen. So we are fallible humans, so we make mistakes sometimes. It doesn't mean that if we can come to the answer of this question, oh yes, for sure it's nurture, that means it's the parents' fault. There's no such thing like that. So I would love to join in this debate, but every time when I talk about something like this, I'm also very conscious that we can say that yes, it has a part to play, but the important thing is always, now what can we do? So whether it's nature, whether it's nurture, what can we do now? We don't need to always come to a conclusion. I mean, for knowledge purposes, for theoretical purposes, it's nice to talk and debate about it. But when we're talking about real human lives, we always come back to the point like, what can we do now? Is this information helpful? Is the parents already carrying a heavy sense of guilt around that? Is it appropriate to bring this up? So the curse of knowledge.
I love that she brought that up.
Right.
And to notice that shame, blame, guilt, this is not the point of the conversation. We're not blaming, shaming, or making the parents feel bad about, oh, you're not doing a great job. Everyone is doing the best they can. And what's more important is to recognize that. And also for parents, you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to carry everything alone. If you're a parent and you believe that the responsibility of the child is fully on your shoulders, it's a very heavy responsibility to carry. You can ask for support. Support is allowed. Professional support, social support, support from your spouse, all of that is okay. There's no need for us to blame, shame, or guilt each other into feeling bad. And when those frames are absent, what can happen is responsibility. Like what Evelyn said, what can I do about it now? Response able. I can take action. Because if I'm occupied with all those emotions, I contract myself and I am stuck. And I'm blaming, shaming, guilting myself, and I stay in the same place and I don't have the energy or capacity to take care of myself or the kid, and it doesn't serve anyone. So we don't want to attack parents. That's not the point. We want to support them.
Right. I love that sum up and that this in syncness of the answers. So the idea is there are many different roles, as we've established, could be nature, could be nurture, could be both. And there's also situations, things that just happen that are out of our control. The point of us having discussions about this now is to see how can we engage with the child in the moment, the person in the moment, and what can we do to work together to help the child improve. There is another question. So this I think it's adding on to something that we talked about earlier. The question is, this person says that they realize that it's difficult for parents to seek help. And a lot of people tend to be in denial. So I imagine this scenario is there is a conversation happening, but that parent tends to go, no, my kids are all right. And so the person questions, what can we do to help parents overcome this reluctancy to seek help? So it's a reluctant parent, not someone who hasn't thought about it, but a parent who's reluctant.
And many times reluctance and resistance are the same. And it could also relate back to what we just covered, shame, blame, guilt. If I feel those emotions, if I admit that something is up and I blame myself, I don't want to do that. This is the ego protecting itself. And again, we come back to the three pillars. What's the truth? The whole truth, nothing but the truth, but at the same time, gentleness. Without judgment, comparison, or expectation. And not judgment in the sense of making right judgment and decisions, but judgment as in judging ourselves, judging others. Because that takes energy and it doesn't really serve anything. And sometimes it does. We feel superior. We might have certain emotional outcomes that we get. But in terms of our actual life, very little. Expectations, they are proper expectation. Oh, at this age, our child should develop these competencies. And if they are not met, then we should look into it. I should be a great parent and give everything to my child, and all of that, that's heavy and that's not very supportive. In comparison, if I'm comparing, am I a good parent, a better parent than the other person? That's not the point. Am I supporting my child the way my child needs me to support them? Do I have the capacity for that? Able and willing. Am I able to? Am I willing to?
Thanks, Leon. Let's take that a step further. Let's imagine, for both panelists' sake and for the sake of the person who asked the question, let's imagine there is a parent now who is in front of us. For some reason, they have joined the panel and they say, no, my child is all right, like my child is all right, they're fine. Don't know what the reason is, but there seems to be like this sense of reluctance. How can we make them feel more comfortable to explore mental health, the mental health topic? What would you say to that parent?
Maybe I'll jump in for this one.
Sure.
I okay. All right. I'm pretty sure that those who studied counseling will know this technique that's called motivational interviewing. Those who studied psychology and counseling, they know this. It's actually applicable to the public as well. So this thing about motivational interviewing, it's actually used for those with addictions. So we know that addiction issues are the hardest to tackle. They are the hardest people to say like, stop being addicted. So motivational interviewing has been shown to work very well with groups who are facing difficult denial issues. So the core of motivational interviewing is that you never put yourself in the position that I'm resisting you, I am telling you that you're wrong right now. So remove yourself from that position where being against that person, because it creates more struggles anyways. That's the first thing. Number two is you go with the flow. So if the parents are telling you that yes, my kids are all right, okay, so you're coming to me and said my kids are fine, then I will probably agree with you and I will say that yes, because you are the one who knows your child the best. So of course, if you say that your kid is all right, then I'm gonna agree with you that your kids are fine. Then after that, when they feel more comfortable, I'm not saying that trap them or bait them, but when they feel more comfortable, like they are not like ready to defend, this is the moment when you slip in, like I guess you see the way I do things now. This is when
Right.
you this is when you slip in that question. So, oh, by the way, who was that person who asked you to come here in the first place? And then you see, like it brings up that topic of like, oh yeah, this friend is very annoying. Keep saying this. Oh, then you'll be like, interesting. What does your friend say? And then they'll be like, "Duh, duh, 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 okay, my child's not looking at them. When they try to talk to him, my child will just get angry and walk away. And then you'll be like, oh, okay, all right. What's your point of view? And then after that, they'll be like, yeah, but it's fine. When my child is at home, he's responsive when I'm talking to him. He doesn't have any anger problems. It's just with this friend. Then in a way, right, without you doing anything much, the whole situation is played out in front of you. You already know what the friend is saying. You already know what the parent feels, and then perhaps you can eventually just come in. Oh, okay. I realize this is not really my business, but maybe you want to hear my opinion also. You ask. If they say no, they're fine. Then it's like, okay, I tried my best. If they say yes, good opportunity, bring in a different perspective, but do it like what Leon said, with love, with gentleness, not with judgment. Because if you're gonna do the judgment thing, it's gonna bring you through stage one again, which will derail all the work that
Right.
you've done previously to get them to actually get comfortable.
I like how it's laid out in stages as well. I think if I'm hearing it right, it sounds like one thing we can do is create that sense of safety, as in, I just want to understand what brings this up, if they're talking about it, to kind of get them to talk more about it or to explore it a bit deeper. What brings this up, or what makes you uncomfortable about this, or just getting them to tell you more, and then inviting or checking if they're okay to hear your thoughts. But essentially, it's creating that non-judgmental space to hear them out. And that makes it easier for them to share. Whether or not they are reluctant, at least they are talking more about it. And then you can nudge them or offer to nudge them somewhere.
Sounds perfect, Ethan.
Okay, let's see. There is also the question of, I see, how can we raise awareness educating parents to children and some motivating issues? Right. I think, so this question asks mostly about, I think it is in a similar vein, I think it deepens the question, talks about how some parents and maybe those of different generations, even the current generations, have a lot of stigma or a lot of belief that, this is not real. And they are reluctant to even look for resources. So in this sense, it's a closed one. I think do not want to look for resources. where would you point such a person? Is there anything that can be done if somebody is that not willing to take the initiative to find out more?
I would probably point them home. Okay, but in all honesty,
Mhm.
you can only guide a person up to a certain point. So if they are very rigid, that my perspective will not change. Maybe you can just give them some materials, maybe some brochures, some leaflets that has helpful information. Pass it to them, and then after that, it's like, oh, but this is something that's interesting. Maybe you can take a look at it. Um, it the if they are in that mindset and you are someone who's close to them, that change may not come from you. It has to come from themselves. Meaning, it's always hardest. Even for myself, I'm a clinical psychologist, but you say like, oh, go and change your dad's mindset. Oh, I'd be like, oh no, count me out, because sometimes that proximity creates a lot of problems. So
Mhm.
unless that person, like for example my dad is the person who wants to change himself, it's going to be hard for me to drag him off somewhere and say like, you need to change, talk to this person, settle. It rarely works like that.
Mhm.
However, if this question is posed in a way that is saying like, we as the parents, we feel that it's okay to get mental health support, but our parents, which is like the grandparents or maybe the aunts and the uncles, are the one who are say, no, cannot go to the temple is better, or wait, it's fine, just give them time. Then I would say, use a different strategy, which is have boundaries. um, I'm not
Mhm.
saying that they are not allowed to know what's going on about your family life, but eventually there should be healthy boundaries in a sense that we hear your opinion, we respect it because you are our elders. But eventually, I will discuss about this with my partner and we will make the final decision. In that way, they feel respected. They know that you've already heard their opinion. And it's
Mhm.
if they say that no, you're not gonna be allowed to do it, then it might not be something that you can solve. So work on having that boundaries. If this is best for your family, go ahead with it. If this is something that you also agree with them, but make sure that this comes from your family, like you discuss this with your partner and you agree on it, not because your uncle said so, not because your father said so, but because this is the best decision for your family.
Mhm. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Sometimes it's about really identifying what the person's motivation is, if it's there, and if this is something they're very resistant in, or if somebody is coming in to offer or force you to not seek services or whatnot. It's looking at where to draw your boundaries, to acknowledge what they have shared, but at the same time make a decision that's best for you. Leon, anything you'd like to add in?
I love it. You don't have to take every option that's given to you or every advice that's given to you, because not every advice is good advice and they don't live your life. So how would they know? So they can have their perspective, but you don't have to fully live their life.
Mhm. Okay, thanks for sharing that and helping us sum it up. There's also a question that was asked here. It says, how can adults detect if children are going through any kind of mental health issues, especially if the child is reserved or quiet?
Okay. I think I'm just gonna jump in here, and I would say that the previous answers or the discussion that we had
Mhm.
earlier, such as sleep, such as diet, such as the personality changes, would be a good guideline at this stage, because
Mhm.
this would be not so much directly related to the character of a child, meaning like, oh, because my child doesn't jump to answer questions, because my child may not be the one who has the most friends in class, therefore there may be an issue. However, again, going back to the other guideline that we have, if this is something that is really bothering you, it doesn't hurt to get a second opinion. The first opinion is yourself. The second opinion will be the professional.
Mhm. Okay, Thank you for sharing. I think very quick one. There was a question asking about the +5 -5 kg. What duration was that?
Let's give it a month.
So if you see added 5 kg or a lost 5 kg within a month, then that is one of the signs to look out for. Just taking the opportunity to answer that question since we touched it.
And be careful, it's not just puberty.
Okay. There is a question as well here with regards for educators. So this question says, as educators, how can we help children going through mental health issues if the parents also have mental health issues? I think this is a tricky question, but I'm always keen to hear, since we talked today about how there is a system around the child. So if the parents are also facing issues, what can educators, teachers, perhaps even other parties do, but specifically educators for this questionnaire?
To know that educators are not equipped with the competencies of counseling or counselors or clinical psychologists, that's one thing. But to also not disregard our humanity. So to care for the parent as well as the child, I think that itself plays a big role. And also to invite them to really look into meeting professionals. And it might come back to, again, the three: shame, blame, guilt, and to ensure that, hey, it's okay, we're human. Nobody taught us how to be parents. We didn't learn that in school. There's no Parenting 101 where you got HD or any of those assignments for. You have to learn on the go.
Right.
It's okay to be compassionate towards yourself and to take care of yourself. And that will support you to take care of the kids.
Right. I think that's a really interesting point. Taking a note to not pressure oneself as an educator to fulfill the shoes of a counselor or clinical psychologist, but to offer that sense of safety to the parent that, when you have these conversations with the parent, it's not a form of judgment. It comes from a place of care, and that you are willing to make that space for the parent where needed. Evelyn, yourself?
I've actually worked with a lot of remarkable teachers, and it's always very inspiring to hear about how much they care. They could be working in a big group of children as big as like 40 kids, and yet they still had the time to pick out that one kid there was something going on, and then they highlighted it to the parents. So never underestimate, I mean, teachers don't underestimate like the influence that you have. Maybe it doesn't happen that first time, but I have gotten a lot of referrals that were because the teachers were concerned enough to mention to parents, and that's why the parents brought the children for an assessment. So don't underestimate the influence that you have. Maybe one time doesn't do it, but similar patterns, every time it happens, you bring it up to the parents, most of them are quite receptive at this stage, to want to do something about it. But make sure that when you bring up this sometimes a sensitive topic, also provide them with resources on like what is the next step. Otherwise, you might just be bringing up a problem, they get really concerned, and they're like, then what do we do? Then they freeze. So it's helpful to bring it up. Then after that, give them like, there are actually some options. If they are not receptive, then okay, next time when it happens again, then you bring it up again. Yeah.
Okay, I'm hearing also a little bit of tenacity there, in the sense where bringing it up once, and then letting it go if there's nothing that can be done, but not hesitating to take note again if you see something troubling in the future.
Yes. However, let's say if the parent has already brought the kid for the assessment, and the assessment states that the kid is fine, then it's time to drop it.
Right.
Tenacity to a certain point.
Right. Tenacity, not to the extent of bullheadedness. Yes.
Not imposing, yes.
Yes, not to impose. Yeah, I like that. It's very, very nicely put. There was a question, I think this would be more directed towards Evelyn. The question asks, as panelists have shared, parents are a huge factor. What is a parent's role in children's therapy?
Excuse me for 2 minutes, I'll be right back.
What are the parents' role in therapy? It depends on what kind of therapy that you're referring to. The parents' role, I'm just quickly coming up with a percentage. Let's say if you think that the therapist's role is 100%, then the parent's role is 1,000%, because the therapist only spends a certain number of hours with your kid. The rest of the time, it's ta-da, it's yourself. You're the one who's spending most time with the child. So based on that assumption, at least with the therapists that I have worked with, parents are always welcome to be very involved. And sometimes even invited into the sessions also to number one, learn about certain skills that your child is working on, understand the goals, and then figure out how you can best work on it for the rest of the days before the next session. So this is not just referring to psychological sessions. This could be speech therapy. This could be occupational therapy. This could be physiotherapy. Sometimes you might need to advocate for yourself, ask more questions. What goals are my kids working on at the moment? How can I help them for during the rest of the week? Sometimes therapists are they have back-to-back sessions. They might be busy, so it's up to you to advocate for yourself. Ask what is being what they are working on, and then say like, then at home, anything I can do, because your involvement gives the therapist an easier life, because the next time they see your kid, the goals are already nearer to be achieved. So yeah, the parents are always welcome in therapy sessions of all forms.
So involvement looks like if invited, to be present in session when needed, to figure out what are the skills that the child is learning and how the parent can support, and to, if possible, find out what are the goals or what areas and goals the child is hoping to work on, and how can, as a parent, how can we support the child. As we're drawing closer to a time limit, I want to thank everybody for your questions. But of course, we have to ask the final question, which is for everybody watching tonight, to put it very quickly. If you've just watched the webinar on children's mental health and so on, what is one thing that a viewer should do after this webinar? Just a quick couple of sentences to help us wrap up.
All right, I would say follow the Reframe project, share any one of those posts. That would be the quickest thing to do to get the ball rolling. Like, this is something that I'm learning about. Create that platform for conversations with people around you. It could be helpful to add in one or two things that you've learned in that post as well, so that people really get intrigued. Oh, okay, this was something that was discussed. Sounds like it's something that I would want to learn myself, or that they could come to you for it. So share, follow. I'm sounding like a social media manager, but share, follow, write one or two lines. Wonderful.
Right, like and subscribe.
I just barely held back from that word, but yes.
Right, it's okay. You don't have to. I'll shamelessly do it. I think that's a thank you for that plug-in. But I also want to acknowledge that you're inviting us to start conversations, even if it's simple as saying, what is one thing that I learned in this webinar that I attended on a Saturday night? Attending a webinar on a Saturday night is a good way to start a conversation, because most people will wonder what happened on that Saturday night webinar. So that's a good way to start a conversation. Leon, in a couple of sentences, what's one thing a viewer can do after this webinar?
You know, something that might support that awareness is to get educated. So in the beginning, Evelyn invited us to look at the DSM. To really go through it is one way. You don't have to memorize the DSM. It's a lot of markers, and you don't have to, because you're not the one diagnosing, you're not assessing. That's the role of the professional who has been trained to observe and monitor and assess. But to have the basic awareness and the knowledge about it is, I would say, valuable.
So it takes some time to get to know what are the mental illnesses that may be out there for kids, and what are some further signs they can look out for. And be curious to know a little bit more about your child's mental health.
Yeah, and to play with them, enjoy their company, love them, cherish them. And if you don't have children, cherish I guess, your own inner child, as we mentioned.
Right, very, very nicely done. Reminder that this webinar is a webinar. At the end of the day, it is engaging with the children in our best capacity that helps move things forward. All right, thanks Leon and thanks Evelyn. Can we get the slides up, guys? Thank you for your questions. Thank you for sharing. Yes, can we please give them a big round of applause? Yes, I know you don't know this, but they're clapping very hard for you. All right, Daryl, can we get the slides up, please?
Do we have any questions from Facebook?
Oh, so those were compiled from Facebook as well. So they were sent to me on. So before you go, everyone, please do take some time to let us know what your feedback is. I think that's really important. I know this is usually the time of the night when the thank yous start appearing in the chat and people start disappearing, but I want to let you all know that webinars wise, we get lots of valuable feedback and ideas on what your needs are as an audience from these forms. So I would strongly encourage you to take some time to scan the QR code. Let us know what are your thoughts, what topics would you like us to explore? Because as organizers, sometimes we get very concerned with what the world wants, but we don't ask the world what it wants. So we'd love to hear your feedback. You can also find the QR code probably somewhere in the link. Yes, the link is here in the chat for you to provide additional feedback. Okay, as we wait for people to fill up the feedback, just checking, Evelyn, Leon, if people want to ask you further questions, what is a way that they can reach out to you, if that's possible?
All right. I have a website, bridgingsite.com. You can speak to me via the website or just email me directly, evelynngui@gmail.com. I think any one of the Reframe project team will be able to share those details with you. So feel free to email me, check out the website, and then after that, let me know how I can help.
Could you give that to us again? It's bridging,
Bridging, bridging psych.
Nice. Shasbini has done it for us. So bridgingpsych.com is where you can find Evelyn, or you can reach out to her via email. And Leon, what about yourself? Where can people find you?
So my website, I just redid it. Now what is up is the corporate side. So the leadership, the team building side. On the self-love part, that is still on, but it's hidden from the main screen. So instead of that, I'll just give you my LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. That's one helpful way to
I'll
go.
drop it in the chat if you're interested to connect. We'd love to get to know you.
Oh, that's very quick.
As you guys were talking, I pulled out my notes.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Tonight, we've had a very full conversation with two of our panelists today, coming from both sides, one from the mental health professional side and Leon from his experience working with children as well as working with adults. We've talked about what are some signs you can look out for today, things like changes in eating habits to sleeping patterns. We've talked about things like how do we bring up this topic? You can slide it in casual conversations with your friends, and you can make a non-judgmental space and just be open so that people can have that conversation. And at the end of the day, what are some things we can do? We can be curious and Google to learn more. And in addition to that, we can start having conversations just like this one, but perhaps tomorrow on a Sunday morning. And with that, I think we will turn off our videos and play a little bit of music from Daryl while we let you fill out the feedback forms, and then we'll close in a minute's time. Thank you, everyone. It has been a pleasure having you here. Keep in touch with us. Our links are in the chat. Please give us your feedback, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everyone. Good night.